And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I got the wasp. Yeah, boy, I hate those things. You know, it's kind of funny. When I was a kid, part of my pastime, I loved to fight wasps. I'd find a big nest, a nest, and I'd throw rocks at them and knock them down. I used to even like to get a close-knit badminton racket or a tennis racket or something like that, nice and big. And in one place that I lived, we had a bumblebee nest in a honeysuckle vine area. And we'd stand out there and we'd wait, a friend of mine and I, and we'd wait until a bumblebee would come out and boy, we'd whack. And used to do that all the time. And then I got a little bit older and I discovered on one occasion when I knocked down a humongous black wasp nest about that big, I was at least 75 feet away from it. And I threw, I didn't think I'd hit the nest, although I used to be a pretty good pitcher. I didn't think I'd hit it. Well, I hit it and I knocked it down. And I watched as one single black wasp, like this, okay, boom, right there. And it was about a mile from there to my house. I got on my bike, rode home, and I could feel my face swelling the whole time. And I walked into the house, and my brother and my mother were sitting at a table talking. And when I walked in, my brother stood up with his fist clenched, like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And I'm going, "Me." I learned right then and there I had developed a really severe allergy to wasps and bumblebees and what have you. And so I have to be extremely careful around them. That's why I was more than a little concerned when there was a wasp that had gotten into my desk during the filming of yesterday's video. So anyway, good to be back with you without being swollen up or in the hospital. All right, as promised, I want to look at Matthew chapter 24. We are examining, obviously, we are examining the doctrine of the return of the absent master in Matthew chapter 25, 14 and following. And let me simply say this. If it is true that the coming of Christ, the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 24, 29 and following, if that is the same as the coming of the Lord of Matthew 25, 14 and following, then there is no futurist eschatology. It's over. It's done. It's cooked. It's false. But of course, you see, we are told repeatedly, well, yeah, Matthew chapter 24, 4 to 34 or verse 35, that's AD 70. But Matthew 25 or Matthew 24, 36 and following, that's the end of time. It is even admitted, as I noted yesterday, Kenneth Gentry, Gary DeMar, Joel McDermott, a host of other postmillennialists especially, they admit that Matthew chapter 24, 29 to 34, refer to the events of AD 70. But they like to claim, and they often claim, that the events of AD 70 were typological. They were a foreshadowing of the real coming of the Lord. Now, I've been doing this for an awful long time, and I have asked, I've challenged those who say AD 70 was a type or a historical foreshadowing, as one arrogant young man says it on Facebook so very often. And I have challenged him over and over and over again, give me a verse. Give me a statement from Jesus or any of the New Testament writers who pointed to the events of AD 70, the impending imminent events of AD 70, and said, now that's going to be awesome, or it's going to be great, but you know what? We're still looking for something even greater. They never compare AD 70 with something else. So in Matthew chapter 24, this is critical for us to understand. Jesus is directly answering the apostles' questions about the destruction of the temple and the city. Now look, amillennialists and postmillennialists agree with this. Okay? Kenneth Gentry is supposed to be writing a book to prove that the Olivet Discourse is divided. And by the way, he took issue with my book, Watching for the Parousia, where Jesus' apostles confused, saying it was, false, absurd, crazy, misguided, etc., etc. And I wrote 4 articles refuting him, and he left us hanging by saying he had discovered an absolutely stunning, definitive, fatal flaw in the preterist view. And I asked him to publish it. I asked him to put it out there for us all to see, but he said we'd have to wait for the publication of his book. And so I'm eagerly awaiting that book in which he says he has discovered the key, fundamental, fatal flaw of the argument for the unity of Matthew 24 and 25. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he hasn't found that. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say Mr. Gentry imagines he's found something, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say when he writes about it, and when I examine it, it's his premise, his argument, his claim will be shown to be false. But maybe not. Maybe he's found the hermeneutical flaw of preterism. We'll see. But back to the text. We are told, right, Matthew chapter 24, 4 to 34 is all about the impending coming of the Lord in judgment in AD 70. Well, I want you to notice that prior to that coming, you would have the abomination of desolation foretold by Daniel, Matthew 24 and verse 15. You would have ensuing upon that, subsequent to that, for then shall be great tribulation, such as has never been, nor ever yet shall be. Matthew 24, 21. So you have the appearance of the abomination of desolation, and you have the great tribulation. And by the way, let's not forget, this abomination of desolation was foretold in Daniel chapter 9 and Daniel chapter 12. And it belongs to the 70 weeks. So whatever Daniel was predicting, it belongs to the 70 weeks. He was predicting the abomination of desolation. Therefore, the abomination of desolation and the great tribulation belong within the confines of the 70 weeks. Not after the 70 weeks, as proposed by many amillennialists and postmillennialists, but within the 70 weeks. Now, all this is the preliminary lead-up to verse 29. Abomination of desolation, great tribulation, and immediately after the tribulation of those days. Now, I want you to notice that Jesus emphatically told his living, breathing apostles, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the one who reads understand. When you see it, flee. Now listen, it is an absolute historical fact that the apostles fled Jerusalem prior to AD 70. And even Eusebius, 4th century church historian, who was really eccentric in an awful lot of ways, Candida Moss, amazing scholar, in her book, The Myth of Persecution, actually says that Eusebius made up an awful lot of his stuff. So for whatever it's worth, Eusebius says the whole church, due to a revelation from the Lord, fled Jerusalem prior to its destruction. So here's Jesus writing to first century living, breathing human beings saying, when you see the abomination, flee. Eusebius says the whole church, based upon a commandment of the Lord, fled Jerusalem before the destruction. Folks, that delimits the abomination of desolation and the great tribulation of the first century. Was the whole church confused? They thought they were obeying a command of the Lord. Well, what was the command of the Lord? When you see the abomination spoken of by Daniel, flee. They saw something, they knew something, and they fled. Amazing. And immediately after the tribulation of those days. Now look, folks, this word eutheos means straightway, and it means immediately. When people, for instance, like Mr. Kyle Pope, and I reviewed this in one of my videos that I did recently, when they try to say, well, eutheos simply means the next thing in order, no matter when it might occur, they're completely destroying the normal use of that word. The eutheos is used 82 times in the New Testament, and it is used most commonly, although not always, but most commonly in reference to Jesus' healings. When Jesus would touch somebody, immediately, eutheos, they were healed. When Jesus said, go and wash yourself, and as he went, immediately he was cleansed, it doesn't mean, the next thing, because you see, when Jesus said, go wash in the pool of Siloam, John chapter 9. The next thing the man did, he left where Jesus was. So simply saying it's the next thing in order is simply false. There's no way linguistically, grammatically, and contextually to insert a 2,000-year gap so far between the Great Tribulation, the abomination of desolation, which the apostles would see, and the events of verse 29 and following. Well, what are the events of verse 29 and following? Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and look, let's get something straight here. Nothing visible was to be seen in the heavens. That's not what this is saying. And yes, we have Josephus in his remarkable account of something that was seen. But the force of the Greek in this text is that what they were going to see, i.e. in the fall of Jerusalem, was the sign that the Son of Man was enthroned in the heavens. Gary DeMar takes that position. Kenneth Gentry takes that position. The Greek of the text indicates that the events, the physical events that they would see, would be the visible sign and the visible proof that Jesus was enthroned on the throne of David at the right hand of the power on high. They would see, they would know, just like Isaiah 26:10 and following, the righteous would see, know, and understand. But the wicked would not know, they would not see, they would not understand until the Son of Man came and swept them away. Matthew 24:37 and following. Okay, I'm out of time. Listen, do yourself a favor. Go to my website, get my book, AD 70, A Shadow of the, quote, real, unquote, end, question mark. In this book, I adduce well over 10 reasons why AD 70 was not a shadow, a historical foreshadowing of anything beyond that event, in contradistinction to all of those who claim that AD 70 was a type and a shadow. But go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, order the book, AD 70, A Shadow of the Real End, question mark. Make mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, saving you $5. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on this morning's Morning Musings. I'll see you on the flip side.